techniques first. It's not okay, so I've got good questions coming in, please keep them coming. So it's not always easy to identify the techniques. You know, you may find an awesome quote but you can't identify a substantial technique. Start easy first. You know, you can look at tone, you can look at repetition, you can look at pronouns and tenses. You want to be able to identify multiple techniques in each quote, then be able to read the quote against the grain. um, you don't necessarily have to do that, but you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to have a different opinion to, you know, what your teacher might say in class in terms of this is the quote, this is what it means. You are allowed to say, no, actually, I think Shakespeare may be foreshadowing something else. And that's totally okay. That's why English is um, that's why English is quite an interesting subject because it allows for that subjectivity. I've seen a question pop up. What do you mean when you say not to choose phrases when choosing quotes? What I mean by that is when, let's say you've got your three quotes and they're all like little phrases. There's just like a couple of words, but they're not achieving their purpose. You do want to have substantial quotes. You definitely, that does not mean, nowhere am I saying they don't have phrases. What I'm saying is have substantial quotes that are linking back to the question, because more than likely you're not able to find as many techniques and phrases. And you know, again, you may be able to find those simple techniques, and it more than likely isn't the best evidence for a big idea. So look for quotes that are substantial, but and you can always use phrases as your secondary quotes. You can always use phrases as, you know, one quote or so, but you want to have substantial evidence. I've seen essays, you know, and those are usually like the beginner essays where I've got three quotes in the paragraph, but they're like quotes like isn't it, or something like that. It's quite little and it's not a proper quote. That's what I mean. Have proper quotes, but I'm not saying don't use phrases or anything. What I'm saying is don't use like, you know, three like little phrases, little sentences for quotes and try to substantiate your point. Make sure you look for valuable evidence from your text, and you'll find that within the text. So if you've got any questions for that, please pop them up. But that's what I meant by don't try to sort of, you know, make it like make it work. Push it to work with just phrases. Look for specific quotes that link back to your point. That's really important. Again, not saying don't use phrases, but all I'm saying is I've seen plenty of essays where it's three quotes and they're all little phrases. They're not answering the questions. They barely have any techniques attached to it. We don't want to do that. So, okay. Um, Again, I've got another question. Don't phrases allow you to integrate the power better? My teacher says to only use keywords from the question. That's a good that's good. So what your teacher would be saying is, if it's long quotes, like they're really long, but they've got those keywords, you want to use those ellipses and only use keywords. That's fine. But what I mean by phrases is there's little like 3-4 word things like isn't it or something like that. So I'm not against phrases. That's not what I'm saying. I'm sorry if I you misunderstood or I said it in a different way. But all I'm saying is have substantial quotes. So don't worry about you know. So I'm not saying to have long quotes worth 2-3 lines. Just have quotes that are substantial. You're allowed to cut your quotes short and use ellipses and stuff. That's all good, but just make sure that they're substantial, and they link to the evidence that you're making. And I said that I did that thing about phrases from personal experience of looking at essays where too often it's just little phrases. They're not proper quotes. They're not quotes that link back to the ideas. Okay, how long, short the quotes that I choose? B. They should just they should just link back to the evidence that you're talking about. So, you know, doesn't, again, there's no specific line, you know, like a measurement for it. And again, I'm sorry if I confused you with this, but what I mean is just make sure that answering your question, there's a technique, there's a solid technique that's associated with it, and the evidence links back to your points. If I'm talking about power, if I'm saying that, you know, Shakespeare's Elizabethan context influenced the way in which he portrayed power, I'm not just saying, you know, 2 lines said by Richard about tis our discontent, something like that. I'm actually giving the quote where he talks about this is the discontent. I forgot the quote now. I remembered it all for last year. But what I mean is that you want to have quotes that link back to your point, that have a technique associated with it. That's what I mean. I've got no discrimination between phrases and quotes. Just have quotes that are that actually answer the that actually back the point that you're talking about. Okay, cool. Again, if you've got any questions, please ask them. But hopefully, we clear that point up about phrases versus quotes. Just have quotes that are effective, that are substantial, and that link back to your evidence with good techniques. So now let's focus on techniques. Identify the easy techniques first: tone, repetition, pronouns, tenses. You want to be able to identify multiple techniques in each quote. May not always be the case. You know, you would have seen lots of memes about, okay, there it is, Prime, it was snowing English teacher. That's fine. Like sometimes you can't find as many, but you want to use quotes that have techniques in it. You don't want to introduce a quote without technique. Um, yes, tis the winter of our discontent. Someone just posted a quote up for me. That's right. Made glorious by the son of York. Thank you. I remember that now. Cool. So alright, so identify multiple techniques in each quote. Read quotes against the grain. You're totally allowed to. Look for how the quote might be meta, so how it may be commenting on the role of language, how it may be commenting on the text itself, and link analysis to purpose. So let's have a look at this and let's break it down. So I've got from the Tempest, our revels now are ended. These are actors. As I foretold you, we're all spirits and are melted into air, into thin air. So there's that collective pronouns, supernatural imagery, which equates to the illusion of the theta. Sorry, illusion to theta. There's repetition and also a wistful tone. Then in Hackseed, I've got it's no longer a magical staff, it's only a wooden stick. Broken, should he bury it certain fathoms in the earth? That would be histrionic. Anyway, who'd be the audience? So we've got truncated sentences, we've got lots of rhetorical questions, it dismisses the symbolism of the Cain motif, and it mirrors the end of Tempest as he breaks the fourth wall. That's meta. You're breaking the fourth wall to connect directly to the audience. That's metatextuality. But Felix rejects the novel's audience and the act of performance for their entertainment. So now these quotes, I may not use the whole thing. I may just use the first line. I may chuck this line out. These are actors and like put ellipses and use the first few lines. Whatever works, but you want to have these quotes, these techniques that are evident here, and be able to elaborate on the effect of it. Okay, so Richard III, original analysis. So let's have a look at language analysis here. Richard immediately asserts his agency in the narrative in his opening soliloquy. There we go. Now is the winter of our discontent. Richard's commanding tone heightens his proclamation of power and blatantly repudiates Elizabethan values of determinism and the divine right of kings. That's my technique. It's not the most sophisticated technique in the dictionary, but it's there and I've got a very solid effect that is telling me, what is this technique doing? Moreover, the striking immediacy of the lines masterfully ensnares the audience in Richard's devious machinations, making them complicit through the subtle use of the collective pronoun we. So simple techniques, but it's about the simple techniques, but it's about the effect about the effect. Got a question? Can you explain meta in more detail? Meta is basically when texts go meta, they're commenting on language, about the power of language. So they are, they'll be commenting on their role, as a tool of literature, for example. Or meta could be about breaking the third wall to directly communicate with the audience. That's what metatextuality is. Is when a text is recognizing its own role in literature, saying that this is how language is used, for instance, or breaking the fourth wall to talk directly to the audiences. So original analysis. Form. Analyze form on two levels. There is the macro level and micro level. So macro, we're looking at text type, we're looking at the genre. Narrative perspective is in linear, is a non-linear perspective, linearity, structure, and pastiche. Then with micro, we're looking at shot angles, lighting, diegetic sound, rhyme, lineation, enjambment, epigraphs. So you want to be able to use form in a range of different ways. Cool. So again, I've got another question. How many techniques should we have in an essay per quote? I'm answering these because they're like relevant as I speak. There's no specific number to it. Like you can have one technique and have a solid effect. You can have two. However many you can find that are good techniques, you want to use them. You've got the effect for it. Like you've got a solid effect for it. Use it. But yeah, like there's no specific number there. So what I'm going to quickly do is just mark them as done, so that way I can't come, so that way I remember not to repeat myself later on. Okay, cool. So going back, Bright Star now, let's have a look at how we've talked about form here. So, however, the audience is invited to observe the effect of Keats' language on Fanny, particularly how it intensifies and empowers her own feelings and desires. This culminates in the film's ending, where the sustained close up, so we've got a microform technique here. So, the sustained close up on Fanny's face as she reads Keats' poetry, the natural scenery devoid of its previous vibrance and color, transitions her role as a passive observer to an active participant in Keats' poetry. Well, and that's my technique. So I've just got one technique there, which is, microform, but that's all good. I've got a solid effect that links to it. Um, Okay, so whilst Keats focuses on the poet as the author of meaning, Campion exalts the agency of the reader through Fanny's characterization, a macro technique, and emphasizes that it is the reader's engagement and interpretation of poetry that imbues language with meaning. Again, one technique with a effect, and it's macro form here. Okay, so